I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd remember the exact weight of someone's fingertip against my skin, but here we are. It's been 3 years since that summer at Camp Redwood, and I can still feel the ghost of those letters he traced on my back in the darkness, spelling out words I wasn't ready to understand. My name is Alex, and I was 22 that summer, fresh out of college with a degree in environmental science and absolutely no idea what to do with my life. My parents suggested I take a gap summer before diving into job applications, so I applied to be a counselor at this wilderness camp in Northern California. The pay was terrible. The accommodations were basically glorified shacks, and I'd be spending 8 weeks with a bunch of teenagers learning about forest ecosystems. It sounded perfect, honestly. A chance to clear my head, to figure out who I was without the constant pressure of deadlines and expectations. What I didn't expect was Ethan. I arrived at camp on a Wednesday afternoon in early June. The air smelled like pine needles and campfire smoke, and everything had this golden quality to it, like the whole place existed in perpetual late afternoon light. The main office was this rustic cabin with a covered porch, and that's where I met most of the other counselors. There were about 15 of us, mostly college students or recent grads like me. Everyone seemed friendly enough, doing that awkward dance of introducing yourself to strangers you'll be living with for the next 2 months. Then, the camp director, Margaret, started assigning bunkmates. The counselor cabins were small, just 2 beds, a couple of dressers, and a shared bathroom that was more suggestion than actual plumbing. She was reading off names from a clipboard when she said, "Alex Morrison, you'll be with Ethan Chen in cabin 7. I looked around the group, trying to figure out which one was Ethan, and that's when he raised his hand. He was sitting on the porch railing, one leg dangling, the other pulled up against his chest. Dark hair that fell across his forehead, these intense brown eyes, and this quiet smile that made my stomach do something I wasn't prepared for. He was wearing a faded gray t-shirt and jeans, and there was something about the way he carried himself, this calm confidence mixed with gentleness, that made everyone else in the group seem too loud, too eager. "Hey," he said, hopping down from the railing. "Looks like we're bunkmates." "Yeah," I managed, shaking his hand. His grip was warm and firm. "Looking forward to it." That first night in cabin 7 was awkward in the way all first nights with a stranger are. We unpacked in relative silence, doing that thing where you're hyper-aware of every sound you make, every movement. The cabin was small enough that we were constantly in each other's space. I'd reach for my duffel bag and nearly bump into him. He'd turn around and we'd do that little dance of trying to get past each other in the narrow aisle between the beds. "So, environmental science?" he asked, sitting on his bed while I struggled to fit my clothes into the tiny dresser. "Yeah, you?" "Art history, actually. Graduated last year." I turned to look at him, surprised. "Art history? What brings you to wilderness camp?" He laughed, and it was this warm, genuine sound that filled the whole cabin. "I know, right? Seems like a weird fit, but I grew up camping with my family. My dad's really into hiking, and some of my best memories are from trips like this. Plus, I figured I'd spent 4 years staring at paintings in climate-controlled museums. Might be good to remember what actual sunlight feels like." We talked for another hour, sitting on our respective beds as the sky outside darkened from blue to purple to black. He told me about growing up in Seattle, about his younger sister who was studying medicine, about how he'd always loved art but wasn't sure he wanted to work in a museum forever. I told him about my family in Ohio, about how I'd chosen environmental science because I wanted to do something that mattered, but now I wasn't sure what that actually meant. There was something easy about talking to Ethan. He listened in this focused way, like he was actually hearing what you were saying instead of just waiting for his turn to talk. And when he spoke, his words were thoughtful, measured. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. He was just being himself. That first week of camp was chaos. The kids arrived, 60 teenagers between 13 and 17, all of them excited and nervous and loud. We spent our days leading hikes, teaching them about local flora and fauna, supervising swimming in the lake, and generally making sure no one died or got poison ivy. By the time we collapsed into our beds each night, we were exhausted. But Ethan couldn't sleep. I didn't notice it the first few nights. I was so tired that I'd pass out the moment my head hit the pillow. But about a week in, I woke up around 2 in the morning to use the bathroom. and when I came back I realized Ethan was still awake. He was lying on his back, staring at the ceiling, his hands folded on his chest. "You okay?" I whispered. He turned his head to look at me. In the darkness, I could just make out the outline of his face. "Yeah, sorry. Did I wake you?" "No, I just got up to pee. Can't sleep?" He sighed. "I've always had trouble sleeping. Insomnia, I guess. My brain just won't shut off." "That sucks." "Yeah." He was quiet for a moment. "Sorry if I keep you up." "You're not," I said, climbing back into my bed. "But if you need to talk or something, I'm here." "Thanks." I fell back asleep, but over the next few weeks I became more aware of Ethan's nighttime wakefulness. Sometimes I'd stir in the middle of the night and see him sitting up, reading by the light of a small book lamp. Other times, I'd hear him moving around quietly, trying not to disturb me. Once I woke to find him standing by the window, looking out at the dark forest, his arms wrapped around himself. We developed a routine during the day. We'd wake up early, before the kids, and walk down to the lake together to watch the sunrise. It became our quiet time, just the two of us, drinking terrible instant coffee from the camp kitchen and talking about everything and nothing. He'd tell me about the art he loved, describing paintings in such vivid detail that I could almost see them. I'd talk about the trees around us, pointing out different species, explaining the ecosystem. "You really love this stuff," he said one morning, about 3 weeks into camp. "What stuff?" "Nature, the environment. The way you talk about it, there's this passion in your voice." I felt my face get warm. "I guess so. I mean, it's important, right? Understanding how everything connects." "It is," he said, looking at me with those intense eyes. "And you're good at explaining it. The kids really respond to you." "Thanks." I looked down at my coffee, suddenly self-conscious. "You're really good with them, too. I saw you yesterday with that kid Marcus, the one who was homesick." "You sat with him for like an hour," Ethan shrugged. "He just needed someone to listen." That was the thing about Ethan. He was always noticing people, paying attention to the quiet ones, the ones who were struggling. And he never made a big deal about it. He just showed up. It was around the 4th week when things started to shift between us. We'd grown comfortable with each other, that initial awkwardness long gone. We'd joke around, steal food from each other's plates in the dining hall, team up to prank the other counselors. But there was something else developing, something I couldn't quite name. I found myself thinking about him during the day, looking for him in crowded spaces, feeling this warmth in my chest when he'd smile at me. I'd had crushes before, on girls mostly, though there'd been this one guy in my dorm sophomore year who I'd maybe thought about more than was strictly platonic, but I'd never really examined those feelings too closely. It seemed easier not to. And now, here was Ethan, my bunkmate, my friend, and I was feeling things that scared me because they felt too big, too real. One night, about a month into camp, I woke up to find Ethan sitting on the edge of his bed, his head in his hands. The moonlight coming through the window cast everything in silver and shadow. "Ethan," I whispered. "You okay?" He looked up, and even in the dim light, I could see the exhaustion on his face. "Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." I sat up. "What's wrong?" "Just can't sleep. It's been worse lately." "Have you tried, I don't know, counting sheep or something?" He laughed softly. "Yeah, I've tried everything. Meditation, breathing exercises, reading boring books. Nothing really works." I hesitated, then said, "My mom used to trace letters on my back when I couldn't sleep as a kid. It always helped." "Letters?" "Yeah, like she'd write words with her finger on my back and I'd try to guess what they were. It was soothing, I guess, the repetitive motion." Ethan was quiet for a moment. "That sounds nice. If you want, I could try it. Might help." I don't know what made me offer. Maybe it was the exhaustion in his voice, or the way he looked so lost sitting there in the darkness. Or maybe it was something else, something I wasn't ready to admit. "You don't have to do that," he said, but there was hope in his voice. "I don't mind, seriously." So Ethan lay down on his bed, on his stomach, and I pulled my blanket around my shoulders and sat beside him. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure he could hear it. I placed my hand on his back, over his t-shirt, and felt him tense for a moment before relaxing. I started tracing letters. Simple words at first. Tree, lake, star. His back was warm under my hand, and I could feel his breathing, slow and steady. After a few minutes, I felt him relax even more, his body sinking into the mattress. "What was that one?" he murmured. "Mountain." I kept going, writing words, feeling the rise and fall of his breath. There was something intimate about it, something that made my throat tight. After about 20 minutes, his breathing deepened, and I realized he'd fallen asleep. I carefully pulled my hand away and went back to my own bed, but I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what I was feeling. This wasn't just friendship. This was something more, something that terrified me, because I'd never felt it this intensely before. The next night, Ethan asked if I'd do it again. And the night after that, it became our routine. He'd lie down, I'd sit beside him, and I'd trace letters on his back until he fell asleep. Sometimes he'd guess the words. Sometimes he'd just lie there quietly, letting the motion soothe him. We never talked about it during the day. It was like this secret thing we shared, existing only in the darkness of our cabin. But I started to notice other things. The way Ethan would sit a little closer to me at meals, how his hand would brush against mine when we were walking and he wouldn't pull away immediately. The way he'd look at me sometimes, with an expression I couldn't quite read. I was falling for him. I knew that now. And it scared the hell out of me because I didn't know if he felt the same way, or if I was reading things into our friendship that weren't there. And even if he did feel something, what then? We lived in different cities. Camp would end in a few weeks, and I'd never actually been with a guy before. I didn't know how to navigate any of this. One night, about a week before camp ended, something changed. I was tracing letters on Ethan's back like usual, and he was quiet, his breathing slow and even. I thought he was asleep, so I started writing different words, more honest words, beautiful, kind, special. And then, without thinking, my finger traced, "I wish." "You wish what?" Ethan's voice was soft, barely audible. My hand froze. "I thought you were asleep." "Not yet." He turned over, lying on his back now, looking up at me. "You wish what, Alex?" My heart was racing. The moonlight caught his face, and he looked so beautiful it hurt. "I don't know," I whispered, which was a lie. I knew exactly what I wished. Ethan sat up slowly, and suddenly we were face to face, inches apart. "I need to tell you something," he said, "and I'm terrified to say it because I don't want to ruin what we have. But I think I'll regret it forever if I don't." "Okay," I breathed. "I'm falling for you, Alex. Maybe I've already fallen. And I know that might be weird or uncomfortable. And if you don't feel the same way, we can just pretend I never said anything and—" I kissed him. I didn't plan it, didn't think about it. I just leaned forward and pressed my lips to his, cutting off his words. He made this small sound of surprise, and then he was kissing me back, his hand coming up to cup my face. It was soft and tentative and perfect. My first kiss with a guy, with Ethan, and it felt like something clicking into place, like I'd been holding my breath my whole life, and finally I could breathe. When we pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. "I'm falling for you too," I said. "I have been for weeks. I just didn't know how to tell you." Ethan laughed, this breathless, joyful sound. "Really?" "Really." He kissed me again, and this time it was deeper, more certain. His hands were in my hair, and I was pulling him closer, and nothing had ever felt so right. We eventually pulled apart, both of us grinning like idiots. "So," Ethan said, his forehead resting against mine, "what do we do now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "I've never done this before, any of this." "Me neither. Well, I've dated guys before, but never someone like you. Someone like me. Someone who makes me feel like this, like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." We spent that night talking, really talking, about our feelings, our fears, what it meant that camp was ending soon. Ethan told me he'd known he was gay since high school, about coming out to his family, about past relationships that hadn't worked out. I told him about my confusion, about how I'd always assumed I was straight, but had these feelings sometimes that I'd pushed down, ignored. How being with him felt like finally being honest with myself. "You don't have to label it," Ethan said gently. "You don't have to have everything figured out. You just have to be honest about what you feel. I feel like I want to be with you, I said. I feel like this is the most real thing I've ever experienced. Then that's enough. The last week of camp was bittersweet. During the day, we still had to be counselors, professional and focused on the kids. But at night, in our cabin, we were just us. We'd lie in Ethan's bed together, talking and kissing and holding each other. He'd fall asleep in my arms, finally getting the rest he needed. And I'd stay awake a little longer, just feeling grateful. On the last night, after all the kids had left and most of the counselors had gone home, Ethan and I sat by the lake watching the sunset. The sky was this incredible mix of orange and pink and purple reflected in the still water. I don't want this to end, I said. It doesn't have to. Ethan took my hand, lacing our fingers together. I live in Seattle. You're in Ohio. That's not easy. But I want to try, if you do. I do, I really do. I'll visit. You'll visit. We'll figure it out. And we did. It wasn't always easy. Long distance is hard, especially when you're also trying to navigate a new relationship and, in my case, coming out to family and friends. But Ethan was patient. He was there for every phone call, every late-night video chat when I was scared or confused or just missing him. I came out to my parents 3 months after camp ended. It was terrifying, but they were more accepting than I'd feared. My mom cried, but she hugged me and told me she loved me no matter what. My dad was quieter about it, but he came around. And when I told them about Ethan, about how happy he made me, they could see it in my face. I moved to Seattle 8 months later, found a job with an environmental nonprofit, got an apartment. Ethan and I took things slow, dating properly, learning each other outside the bubble of camp. And every night, when we'd lie in bed together, he'd turn over and I'd trace letters on his back, sometimes words, sometimes just random patterns. It didn't matter. It was our thing, our connection. That was 3 years ago. We're still together, still learning and growing and figuring out this whole life thing. We got a dog, a golden retriever named Maple. We take camping trips every summer, back to places like the one where we met. And sometimes, when I can't sleep, Ethan traces letters on my back, returning the gesture that started everything. I think about that summer a lot, about how I went to Camp Redwood, trying to figure out my life, and instead, I figured out myself. I found someone who saw me, really saw me, and loved what he found. Someone who taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that opening your heart is the bravest thing you can do. And it all started with letters traced in the darkness, with a bunkmate who couldn't sleep, with the courage to say what we felt even when it scared us. I never did become the kind of person who has everything figured out, but I became the kind of person who's honest about what I feel, who's not afraid to love openly, who understands that the best things in life often come when you least expect them. Sometimes Ethan asks me what I was thinking that first night when I offered to trace letters on his back, and I tell him the truth. I was thinking that I wanted to help him, to take care of him, to be close to him. I was thinking that he looked beautiful in the moonlight and that my heart was doing things I didn't understand. I was thinking that maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something that would change my life. And I was right. Total char count, 24,847.